They placed white lilies in the kitchen. I stood in the doorway, barefoot, the tile cool under my arches, watching Candace arrange them in that crystal vase I'd never liked. Too sharp, too theatrical. The lilies looked funereal. Or maybe that was just me. Everything has looked like morning since Ben died, even breakfast. Candace adjusted a petal, her smile practiced. Polished. The same one she wore at Ben's funeral, so serene, so untouched. I never saw her cry. 3 place settings. Not 4. The clink of mugs, the soft hum of the coffee machine, the clatter of spoons, normal sounds. Domestic sounds. But there was something missing. Not just Ben. Me. I was still here, but I wasn't here. Not really. Like I'd slipped behind the wallpaper while no one noticed. You must be tired staying here, Candace said, not looking up. So many memories. I nodded. I was tired. But not of the house. Not of the memories. I was tired of feeling like the air in a room everyone keeps walking through. I didn't argue. I just stood there, heart silent, while something small and cold began to form inside me. Not grief. Not even anger. Just a quiet alarm. When I married Ben, I was 26. He was 39 and already a father twice over, a widower with shadows behind his eyes and 2 boys who barely looked me in the face. I didn't come into their home to fill a hole. I came to stand beside it. I didn't wear white. I didn't ask for a diamond. We married in the garden behind his mother's house, under a trellis his boys helped him build. Ryan, the older one, held the hammer wrong. Ben let him. I remember the way his hand closed over his son's, steady, gentle. That's the moment I fell in love with him, I think. Not when he asked me to marry him, but when he didn't correct Ryan. I moved into their house slowly, like someone afraid to wake a sleeping animal. I didn't change the curtains. I didn't paint the walls. I kept her photos on the hallway table. A woman I'd never met, but whose presence filled the rooms like old perfume. I dusted her frames gently. I never touched her letters. I remember the first time the little one, Jordan, let me braid his hair after his bath. It was crooked. I didn't say a word when he cried at bedtime, missing a mother he wouldn't call by name. I picked them up from school. Made flashcards for spelling bees. Bought bandages with cartoon characters and sat cross-legged on the floor while they told me their dreams in that half-sleep babble children do when they still trust the dark. When Ben's business took a downturn, I learned bookkeeping. Stayed up past midnight cross-referencing invoices, tightening budgets, calling vendors, printing flyers on the old inkjet printer that left streaks on every 5th sheet. I didn't complain. I made tea. When he had surgery on his knee, I pushed the wheelchair. Learned how to fold it right. Learned which pills he needed and how he liked his eggs the mornings after he didn't sleep. I held his hand during physical therapy while he cursed under his breath. But I never made a show of it. There are women who broadcast their goodness like radio signals, loud, proud, needing to be heard. That was never me. I was a different kind of woman. I was the one who plants things. Quietly. Deeply. Roots before blossoms. I poured myself into that home. Not like water. Not like fire. Like soil, solid and unseen. Holding things in place. I didn't ask for thanks. I didn't expect applause. I told myself love wasn't something you measure in words, but in presence. I believed that. For a long time, I believed it. Even when birthdays started being held at Candace's parents' house. Even when Ryan stopped asking for my opinion on anything, and Candace started using the phrase, Ben's side of the family, like I was the fringe on the hem of something she didn't wear. I told myself they were busy. That the boys were grown, that things change. I told myself I didn't need a front row seat. That background love was still love. But it's funny how small things whisper when the big things fall silent. A forgotten cup in the dishwasher. A thank you unsaid. A glance exchanged over your shoulder when you enter the room. The kind of silence that doesn't come from forgetting, but from rewriting. Sometimes you don't notice you've been left behind until you stop walking and realize no one turned back. And yet, I stayed. I stayed because this was the life I had helped grow. I stayed because I believed, foolishly, that a tree cannot be cut down if it still gives shade. But I was wrong. And the sound of that vase clinking against the kitchen counter, the lilies standing tall and ghostly in their glass coffin, that sound told me something had changed. Not in them. In me. The first sign came from the school. An email, casual in tone, with a subject line that didn't belong in my inbox. Tuition assistance confirmation, Jordan Reynolds. I read it 3 times. Jordan. My youngest grandson. Ryan and Candace's boy. The one who still wore mismatched socks and told me once he liked the way I smelled like books. I hadn't offered to pay his school tuition. Not officially. I just handled it. Quietly. Years ago. I'd seen the stress in Ryan's posture when private school applications came around. I knew the weight of numbers that don't add up. So I arranged for a quarterly withdrawal from my personal account, one of the smaller ones Ben and I kept tucked aside for emergencies and grace. Ben never liked discussing money in front of the boys. He said it robbed them of childhood. So I honored that. I paid in silence. But this email, it wasn't just a receipt. It was a notice. A reminder. Asking if I would continue funding a different amount. Higher. The numbers didn't match. I opened my online banking for the first time in months. I always preferred statements on paper, something I could hold, underline, file away in those neat accordion folders labeled in my handwriting: property, taxes, health, gifts, Ben's pension. I signed in slowly, my fingers stiff from the morning chill. The dogwood outside rattled its dry leaves against the window. The house was too quiet. No television. No humming dishwasher. Just me and the numbers. There it was. Line after line of withdrawals. Transfers labeled things like childcare services, health and wellness program, therapeutic supplies. My breath caught. Because I remembered the Instagram posts. Candace in silk robes at a spa resort in Sedona. Ryan beaming beside a new car with matte black finish and rims I couldn't describe if I tried. The boys dressed in coordinated outfits beside a rental villa with ocean views and a white baby grand piano, captioned, "Healing Space for the Soul." Healing. That was the word they used. I traced the payments back 6 months. Then a year. They started small. A few hundred here. Then thousands. The account was draining. Not just mine, Ben's too. The joint one we kept for the boys' futures. The one we'd promised would only be used for education, health emergencies, or if one of them ever found themselves truly in need. I clicked through every labeled transaction. Some of the names were made-up entities. Wellness foundations. Educational grants. Private consulting firms that, when I searched, led nowhere. Then I saw it. A company name listed on a $4,800 transfer. Croft Strategies. Candace's maiden name. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Then I printed everything. I needed to see it on paper, needed the weight of it. Evidence. At first, I thought I was mistaken. That it had to be some kind of oversight. Maybe they thought they were entitled to access the accounts. Maybe Ben had mentioned something to Ryan before he died, some vague father-son promise. So I pulled the folders from the drawer. Authorization forms. Beneficiary statements. Letters from the attorney. Ben had been meticulous. Every detail outlined. Every condition noted. Every account with clearly stated permissions. Ryan and Candace were not on the trust. Not as account holders. Not as secondary beneficiaries. Not as anything. The only people legally named, besides me, were the boys. The grandchildren. And Ben had written it in his own hand, scanned into the notarized document. For the education and essential welfare of our grandsons. Nothing else. Nothing else. The words swam on the page like a bell tolling underwater. They'd lied. They hadn't just dipped into the funds. They'd repurposed them. Masked luxury under the veil of necessity. Hidden indulgence behind the language of care. I thought of the lilies again. How pristine they looked in the kitchen light. How cold. I closed the folder. Smoothed the cover. Then just sat there, the air around me turning still. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't imagining it, wasn't being sensitive, wasn't reading too much into glances and tone. I was a ledger they had long since assumed would never speak. I had paid for Jordan's tuition. For their therapy retreats. For the Tesla parked in the driveway. For the spa package Candace had posted about, a gift from the universe. No. A gift from me. I wasn't an outsider. I was the foundation. And they had quietly begun to push me out, after using me to lift themselves up. It didn't feel like betrayal. Not yet. It felt like erasure. Like they had redrawn the family portrait and painted me as background. And in that moment, I stopped feeling tired. I felt still. Awake. And I knew, without drama or rage, that it was time to turn the page. Not to tear it. Not to burn it. Just to turn it. Carefully. But irrevocably. The next morning, I rose before the sun. Not out of habit, out of need. The kind of need that wakes you before the alarm, before the birds. A stillness in the house that wasn't peace, but clarity. I moved without turning on lights. Poured water from the kettle. Waited for the whistle. It came slowly, building like breath in a chest before a cry. I poured the tea, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened the folder. The one marked simply, Ben. Inside were documents, photocopies, notes in his handwriting, precise, clean, always in blue ink. He never liked black. Said it looked too final. Too grave. There was the marriage certificate. Power of attorney. Trust directives. A printed email exchange with our attorney confirming account transitions and designated beneficiaries. My name, over and over. 62% of the family business. Transferred to me 6 years ago. Quietly, as he put it. For insurance, he said at the time. I remember the way he'd looked at me, soft, almost apologetic. You're the only one who'll know what to do if something ever happens. At the time, I'd thought he meant emotionally. Now I understood he meant structurally. The house deed was in the same file. My name added 2 years ago. Streamline estate taxes, he said. But now I saw the subtext, the careful planning behind his casual tone. Ben had known. Not everything, but enough. Enough to see the shape of what was coming. He had seen the shift. The dinners missed. The consultations Candace insisted on. The way Ryan stopped discussing things, started signing things. The way decisions were made around me, and eventually, without me. He never spoke ill of them. That wasn't his way. But his fingers told the truth his mouth didn't. Every new clause, every protected asset, was a message, be ready. I was. Not with rage. Not with grief. With resolve. After I finished my tea, I dressed slowly. A gray wool skirt. Button-down blouse. The navy cardigan with the loose button I'd been meaning to mend. Flats. Not because I wanted to appear modest, but because I wanted to feel grounded. The lawyer's office was downtown. A quiet place above a florist shop, filled with the scent of lilies even in winter. I stepped inside and waited. The receptionist greeted me by name. She always did. When Arthur came out, he looked tired but kind, as always. "Morning, May," he said. "You look serious." "I am," I said, setting the folder on his desk. "It's time." He opened it. Skimmed the top pages. His brow furrowed. "You want to execute the transition?" I nodded. Ben didn't prepare all this for nothing. He exhaled, slow and even. "You're sure?" "Do I look unsure?" He didn't answer that. Just turned to his computer, began typing. While he worked, I looked out the window. The florist was unloading a van. More lilies. Always lilies. Arthur printed a stack of forms, one after another. I signed them one by one, my pen steady. He reviewed everything twice. "We'll freeze the trust accounts today," he said. "The audit request will go out this week. If they've used any of the funds fraudulently." "I know." He paused. "You're not angry?" "No." He waited for me to elaborate. I didn't. Because it wasn't anger I felt. It was arithmetic. Precision. The balancing of an equation long out of sync. I left his office with a small envelope of confirmations. Walked the 3 blocks to the bank. At the counter, I handed over my ID. Requested an account freeze. Updated the beneficiary list, Jordan and Michael only. Not Ryan. Not Candace. The teller smiled at me like I was any other woman on any other Tuesday. She didn't know what I was undoing. That night, I cooked dinner. Alone. Not out of habit, but out of defiance. A full meal, chicken, potatoes, sautéed kale. I set the table for one. Lit a candle. Ate in silence. Every bite tasted like purpose. I didn't call them. Didn't explain. They would see soon enough. The money would stop. The audits would begin. And the balance of ownership, of story, of inheritance, of presence, would shift. Not loudly. But absolutely. Because I wasn't just the woman who raised their children. Or the widow who kept house. I wasn't background. I was the ledger. The steward. The archivist of a legacy they assumed would sleep quietly beneath their ambition. They were wrong. And I wasn't going to scream. I was going to correct. Carefully. Completely. Without apology. I didn't announce anything. No dramatic phone calls. No angry confrontations. I didn't send emails, leave voicemails, or demand explanations. That would have granted them a stage. Instead, I moved like a shadow through the house that once excluded me. First came the trust accounts. 3 of them, one for each grandson, and one joint, established as a fallback fund. I froze all 3. Quietly. Legally. Irrefutably. The bank manager hesitated when I handed her the documents. This will remove the current trustee," she said gently. "I know." She looked up at me, polished nails, gentle perfume, 30 years my junior. But she saw it. Whatever was in my face made her nod without further comment. She tapped at her keyboard, printed confirmation slips, and handed them to me like a baton in a race I had already begun to win. Then came the audit. Ben's company had been folded neatly into our family's portfolio. 62% of it in my name. That figure had once felt ceremonial, an act of trust from a husband who believed in me more than I believed in myself. Now, it felt like architecture. A structure that held weight. I hired a forensic accountant. Not one of the local firms, where whispers spread over coffee. A woman from out of state. Retired IRS. Sharp eyes. No tolerance for fiction. Next came the house. The one with the lilies. The one where they had stopped setting a fourth place at the table. I walked through its halls slowly. Not like a guest. Like someone reacquainting herself with a language she once spoke fluently. The kitchen still smelled like my roast chicken. The study still had the water rings on the desk from Ben's old coffee mug. The window above the stairs still whistled in high wind. I called the county clerk. Requested title records. Confirmed what I already knew, the house had transferred to my name 2 years ago. A routine, estate simplification, Ben had called it at the time. Now, it was something else entirely. I called Arthur. Prepare a formal notice. Occupancy change. He paused. You're removing them? No, I said. I'm inviting myself back in. That evening, I received the first call. Ryan. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. Mom? His voice was tight. Guarded. Did you change the trust access? I didn't lie. Yes. Why? Because it needed changing. A pause. We've been using those funds for the boys. No. You haven't. I said it without heat. Just clarity. Another pause. I could hear Candace in the background, sharper tones, hushed. We should talk, he said. I agree. When can we come over? You can't. What do you mean? I mean this isn't a negotiation, Ryan. But. I hung up. Not out of spite. Out of completion. There was nothing left to clarify. Next, the emails came. Candace. First polite. Then indignant. Then frantic. You misunderstood. You're misinterpreting the legal scope. This could harm the boys. I responded once. Everything I've done is documented. You'll find it orderly. Then silence. Not mine. Theirs. That's when the lawyer letters began. Pending clarification of authority. Requesting mediation. I sent back the same 3 documents each time: trust directive, ownership confirmation, audit findings. No arguments. No explanations. Just proof. At the next board meeting for the family business, I attended in person. I wore ivory. A color Ben had once said made me look like a lighthouse in fog. I sat at the head of the table. Ryan arrived late. Candace did not come. No one challenged my presence. I spoke only twice. Once to vote on the budget. Once to approve a reallocation of funds toward educational grants for external applicants, real children, with real needs. The motion passed. That night, I walked the shoreline behind the house. The sky was deep blue, streaked with dusk. The wind lifted the hem of my coat. I looked at the home lit behind me, soft, warm, waiting. I was not angry. I was not triumphant. I was restored. Silently. Precisely. They called again after the will was read. Not to apologize. Not at first. Ryan's voice was brittle, edged with confusion more than remorse. Candace didn't speak. I imagined her standing behind him, arms folded, calculating. The inheritance remained intact, for the boys. Safeguarded now. No longer a feeding trough for ambition. But they hadn't expected the house. The business shares. The authority. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Ryan said. I let the silence stretch between us until it thinned to a thread. Then I said, "You made it easy." He hung up. After that, the calls stopped. The emails came less frequently. Candace tried once, an apology couched in justifications, sugar with a grit of salt. I didn't respond. Instead, I packed. Not out of grief. Out of intention. The lake house had always been Ben's dream. A quiet place, tucked behind tall grass and soft birch trees. He used to sketch floor plans on napkins. After he died, I made those sketches real. The house isn't grand. But it breathes with warmth. Now, in the mornings, I wake with birdsong instead of tension. I drink coffee by the window and watch the mist lift off the water. Sometimes I bake. Sometimes I write letters I never send. The boys visit. Not often. But enough. Jordan asks questions. About Ben. About the house. About the photo of me and his grandfather dancing in the kitchen, flour on our clothes, joy in our eyes. He asks quietly. Thoughtfully. Once, he brought a drawing. A house with trees. A woman in the window, smiling. "She looks like you," he said. "She is me," I replied. He nodded, as if he understood more than he should. And maybe he does. Sometimes, legacy is not what we leave, it's what we protect. I don't think they'll come back. Not Ryan. Not Candace. Their silence no longer wounds. It simply affirms what's already been separated. But the house is mine. The truth is mine. My name remains inked where it matters. I was never just the wife. Never just the helper. Never just the placeholder. I was the cornerstone they stood on, and tried to forget. Now, I am not loud. But I am undeniable. I was not erased. I endured. And I chose peace. On my terms. In my home. By the lake, where the water keeps its promises, and the trees do not lie.